Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out here tonight with us. I'm Peter Steeves. I'm professor of philosophy and director of the Humanities Center here at DePaul University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to a very special event in the center's year-long series, Lend Me Your Ears, The Sound of the Humanities, as we together embark on an evening with Edgar Oliver. What an honor it is to have this amazing artist with us. Born and raised in Savannah, Georgia, Edgar Oliver has lived and worked in New York City since 1977. He's a poet, playwright, actor, and storyteller who's been active in New York's downtown theater and performing arts community for more than 30 years. Many of you will know Edgar from his appearances on The Moth, which has proclaimed him the world's, perhaps the galaxy's, greatest living raconteur. Edgar's been a sought-after stage actor for many years and is responsible for creating 3 acclaimed one-man shows: East 10th Street, Self-Portrait with Empty House, Helen and Edgar, and most recently, In the Park. Edgar's also produced 4 collections of poetry, has written a novel entitled The Man Who Loved Plants, and regularly appears on television on the Science Channel. Much of his work has won awards. All of it is creative, thoughtful, engaging, transformative, innovative, and truthful. To go on describing all of Edgar's many accomplishments and talents would take us at least halfway through his time with us tonight. So instead, before inviting him to the stage, let me offer just 2 brief points in an effort to try to frame what we're about to experience together. That we tell a story to ourselves that gives unity to our life and structure to the self itself seems obvious to me. The story we're telling is one way in which we give meaning and coherence to our existence on a fundamental level. To experience something is to experience something with meaning attached. It's not as if we experience raw data in our lives and then process it and add in meaning later. Of course, meaning changes later. That's part of the meaning of meaning. It can't be fixed forever. The story you're telling about yourself will change necessarily. A first kiss you share with someone later can become the important start of a life-changing romance. The kiss changes in the story as the story changes. As we tie together our experiences and make sense of them retroactively, the story and the events influence each other in a hermeneutic feedback loop. We look back on events and they become scenes, necessarily filtered through ever-changing experiences, but it's not as if these filters warp and obscure some truth that was originally there clearly and unfiltered before the event became a scene in the story. Rather, in order to appear at all, moments must appear as interpreted. The first kiss was part of a different scene at one point. Narrativity is the way in which we organize our lives in memory, but also in our immediate experience. We live in stories like fishes in water. Toward the end of modernity, then, it became fashionable to say that narrative is the structure of everything: life, the self, even truth itself. Everything is a story, or at least that's the story I'm telling you tonight. The narrativity out of favor in some circles of academia says perhaps more about academia than it does about narrativity. Postmodernity, with its rejection of linear history and any notion of progress, took over, and like an alpha lion moving into a new pride, its first order of business was to kill off the cubs. Thus, story was gone. But the true lesson of the postmodern turn should really be that stories need not be linear or progressive to be stories. They need not always hang together or have a point or explain everything such that there's a clear beginning, middle, and end. Truth is far richer than what we might have imagined when we thought it was a simple matter of correspondence with objective reality. But all of this is still just a story, and it's a story that narrative can easily incorporate. Fractured and flailing about as it is, the postmodern self today tries to hang together. To help it succeed, we need excellent storytellers, models, seers, psychoanalysts, shamans, artists. The great storytellers work magic on us, molding us inside and out, providing us with a malleable framework on which to hang our experience of the world and our very identity. The storyteller does not merely entertain us or fill us in on what it's like to be him. Instead, he tells us what it's like to be. And this, then, is the second point. In order to do all of this, the storyteller employs voice. A voice, too, is a powerful thing. Metaphorically, to have a voice is to have command, authority, to count, and to matter. God says, "Let there be light." He doesn't think it. And the story of everything begins. And if such a biblical story is not your story, or if you think you have a different interpretation of that story, then lend your voice, speak it out. A voice is fundamentally communal in nature. One uses one's voice to speak, and the act of speaking is always an address, a communion, an establishing, or better yet, an acknowledgement of community. Because words do not merely refer, the voice truly enacts a conjuring, making the things themselves appear before us in an intersubjective space, and pointing to the sense in which we're all in this together. The voice sits in that liminal space so perfectly. It's internal, yet external, mental, yet physical, mine, yet ours. And by means of destroying such binaries, it reminds us again that when we speak, it's the whole body that speaks, the whole body politic that is addressed. That's the power of the voice, the authority of the masterful voice of the masterful storyteller who sees the we that is in the I with the first introduction. And so, imagine then, what can happen when one is in the hands of such a truly talented storyteller, one who speaks in poetry and verse and narrative of all types? Imagine how lucky one would be to have that speaker speak with a voice that knows what a voice is and what a voice does and what a voice can and should be collectively. Imagine how transformative it would be to listen, to actively rather than passively listen, and hear one's own life being shaped by means of the narrating of a life that is not one's own. Imagine your incredible fortune if I were to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to present to you An Evening with Edgar Oliver.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for being here, and thank you for that beautiful introduction, Peter, and thank you for inviting me to be here. I thought what I would do would be to read and perform for you excerpts from my different works over the years, and talk a little bit about my life while doing so. For the past 5 years, I've written and performed a series of shows that I guess are best described as storytelling shows. They're like long monologues that are autobiographical, that are just about my life. So I'd like to begin the evening with excerpts from one of these shows, a show called Helen and Edgar. Helen and Edgar is about my childhood. It's a show I developed with Catherine Burns, the artistic director of the Moth, which I don't know if you all know what the Moth is. It's a storytelling event that happens. It started out in New York and it happens periodically there, and now I think it happens all over the country. So Helen and Edgar was developed from different stories that I told at the Moth over the years about my childhood growing up in Savannah, Georgia, with my sister Helen and with my mother. My mother was a painter, and I think she was a great painter. So this show, Helen and Edgar, I hoped would be, and I hope is, a portrait of Mother, really. So I'll begin with Helen and Edgar. I wish I could actually perform this for you, but I'm not sure that I really know it by heart. So I'll read it and maybe do a combination of both. But, well, just so you know, this excerpt is about 10 minutes long. Ivy grew madly all round the house. Out front, there was a sea of ivy below the front porch. Ivy grew madly out back as well. There were only a few patches of dirt, bare of ivy, in the backyard where we could dig and make mud pies. It was as though the ivy loved us, as though it wanted to climb up our arms and our legs. The ivy loved Mother especially, I think. We all three loved the ivy, the way it surrounded us. When it rained, the ivy leaves bobbed up and down, and the sound of the rain falling on the ivy was beautiful. Every now and then, black men would come through the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking if there were any work that needed to be done. There was almost always something kind and beautiful about these men, and Mother would always try to find something for them to do. But there was this one man who came round very persistently, demanding that Mother hire him to clear away the ivy. Something about his keen desire to destroy the ivy was frightening, and Mother always sent him away. The last time he came by, we all three went to the front door together, determined to protect our ivy. Mother stood holding the front door open, and Helen and I flanked her. Mother explained once again that we loved our ivy and had no desire to get rid of it. This sudden rage came over him. "Do you want your children to die?" he shrieked, pointing to Helen and me. And then he wheeled and pointed to a small green lizard that was climbing one of the columns of the porch, and he shrieked, "See that? That's a scorpion. They're horribly poisonous. They breed in the ivy. If one of those scorpions bites your children, they'll die." And then he wheeled and he pointed gleefully at Helen and me again, and he shrieked, "Is that what you want? Do you want your children to die?" And then he stormed off. We all three stood in shocked silence. It was as though he had delivered some horrible curse upon us. And truly, as we stood there, the front porch suddenly seemed a terribly dangerous place to be. There were scorpions everywhere, scampering up the columns of the porch, leaping along the railings. We huddled together in terror, surrounded by scorpions. There were scorpions climbing all over the house. We retreated inside, and for some reason, we never spoke of what had happened. We never uttered a word about the scorpion man and the horrible curse he had put upon us. But we lived in terror of scorpions after that. If we waded through the ivy in the backyard, it was in fear of our lives. And at night, when I got into bed, I was terrified there might be a scorpion lurking under the covers. I would lie there and look out the window into the dark and imagine that a scorpion might dislodge the screen and climb in over the sill and drop onto my bed. I don't know when my fear of the scorpions waned. Eventually, I guess just because they seemed so kindly and sweet and harmless, I forgot my fear of them. But it wasn't until years later, one day when Helen and I were speaking of it, that we realized they were never scorpions in the first place. They were always simply lizards. When had we realized that? And how could Mother have been so gullible as to have believed that man? But she must have believed him, otherwise surely she would have told us, innocent little children that we were, that those weren't scorpions at all, but simply lizards, and not in the least venomous. Mother must have believed him, because once when she was standing on the front porch, the clasp to her favorite gold bracelet broke, and it flew off her arm and out over the railing and landed in the middle of the ivy. And out of fear of the scorpions, Mother refused to look for it, but let it lie there, lost in the ivy, lost in the realm of the scorpions. Once, when we were all three eating watermelon on the back porch, Helen and I were having fun spitting watermelon seeds over the railing. We grew inspired by the many watermelon seeds. We began planting them all over the backyard, digging holes with kitchen spoons and pouring in watermelon seeds and then covering up the holes, thinking that in the fecund earth of Savannah, watermelon vines would sprout effortlessly, and that by the end of the summer there would be huge watermelons all over the backyard. We waited and waited, but at the end of the summer, to our great disappointment, no watermelons had sprouted. The next summer, we decided to set up one of those collapsible swimming pools. So we got one and we set it up in the backyard. This huge drum of corrugated iron that came up to here on me with a bottom of swimming pool blue rubber. And then we turned on the hose and we began filling up the pool, which took hours. We watched in fascination as the water rose. Filling the pool was probably the most satisfying thing about it. Before it was half full, we jumped in and let the water rise around us. But after a few days, we barely used the swimming pool. We were on the go in the car so much, driving to Hilton Head or to the beach at Tybee or to swim in the Ogeechee River or in the river at Bluffton. The water in the swimming pool grew opaque, ink black. Leaves and branches floated across its surface, and God knows what lurked in its depths. It was more forbidding than any swamp. No one in their right mind would have gotten into it. It remained brim full as well, replenished by the summer's many rains. All through that summer, the pool exercised a strange fascination over the backyard. It was tall and mysterious. The rain went across it, and its mystery was stirred, and we wondered at its depths. We would gaze at the black surface of the pool and imagine strange monsters lurking there, ghastly things, corpses. Finally, one day, we destroyed the pool. We attacked it gleefully, bashing down its sides and watching in delight as the black water poured out in all directions. We kept waiting for monsters to be revealed. I think we were all three convinced there was a human corpse in those waters. But there was nothing in the pool. It was empty. But at the pool's bottom, a mystery entirely unexpected awaited us. The rubber bottom of the pool, now black with sludge, rose up in strange humps everywhere. There were things underneath the pool's bottom. What could these things be? The thought was horrifying. We all three grabbed the side of the pool and began heaving it up, peeling it from the ground. What we saw was more horrifying than anything we could ever have imagined. There were watermelons everywhere. Huge watermelons, but they were white, absolutely white, albino watermelons. The watermelons we had planted had been growing there, trapped under the swimming pool, trapped, growing blindly in the dark. Their whiteness was as horrible as the horror of their fate. We could not bring ourselves to touch them, and the thought of slicing one open to see what it was like inside was unimaginable. How we got rid of them, I don't remember. Such was the fate of the albino watermelons. So that's from Helen and Edgar. So that's Helen and Edgar. The first full-length storytelling show I wrote was called East 10th Street, Self-Portrait with Empty House, or East 10th Street. This show premiered about 5 years ago in New York. It describes my years of living in an old rooming house on East 10th Street and all the strange and amazing and crazy people who lived there in the house with me. I arrived in New York in 1977 after 2 years of living in Paris with my sister Helen. I was renting a room by the week in an old hotel on the Upper West Side, but I'd only been in New York a few days, and one day I was downtown looking for a place to live, and I found myself on this beautiful block of East 10th Street that was lined with many trees, And as I was passing in front of this old, decayed townhouse, I looked up just in time to see a gnarled hand reach through the Venetian blinds and tape an old paper bag to the inside of the parlor floor window. And on the paper bag was scrawled in pencil in this kind of horror handwriting, "Room for rent." So I ran up the front steps and I rang the doorbell, and I wound up renting the room, and I lived there for 35 years. And well, this is East 10th Street is the story of my time in that house. So I'd like to read for you two excerpts from East 10th Street. This first excerpt is, I guess, more the self-portrait aspect of the show. Somehow, I've always felt it was my fate to be outside, looking in at the warmth of other people's houses. Ever since I was 17, I have wandered through the streets of cities. It's the main thing I do with my life, wander aimlessly, always my walk without destination. It's as though I set out when I was 17, walking towards some ultimate solitude from which there is no return. And I always think of my walks as walks of no return, even though I do return at night to the house on 10th Street. And often my walks do have destinations. Very often I wind up in Prospect Park, which is one of my favorite places to go. And recently I have begun to love crossing over from Brooklyn into Queens, across the terrifying no man's land of the Newtown Creek, which is truly a place no one in their right mind except me would go on foot after dark alone. Often my walks are simply into desolate stretches of town, of which there are plenty in New York, and truly in any great city. Cities are magnificent for their desolate stretches, which I, for some reason, find very beautiful. It's as though the desolate stretches really are places of no return, the ultimate edge of things. I like nothing better than to be outside on a dreary, rainy night in November or December in some strange neighborhood when it has grown dark early, and all round me everyone is home or hurrying home, and I'm there under the street lamps like a ghost. It gives me a strange thrill, and as I pass, I love to look in at windows and imagine the warmth and coziness of other people's lives. I feel, in a way, as though I carry my own house with me, like a snail does, my own shell spiraling down from childhood. I'm like a snail in an overcoat wandering the streets of a dreary night. My wandering into desolate stretches, my constant, aimless wandering is the main thing I do as a writer. It's kind of amazing I didn't wind up a hermit peering out the windows of the house on 10th Street, but I didn't. So that's one excerpt. Thanks. So this next passage from East 10th Street is about Donald Milburn. Donald Milburn was a retired mulatto postman who lived on the second floor. In this passage, I also speak of Frances. Frances was an old lady who also lived on the second floor in a tiny room. She liked to lock herself in the second floor bathroom all day long, and she spent all day in there scrubbing away at rags at the bathroom sink. But to get to the bathroom, Frances would have to pass by the door to Donald Milburn's room. And Donald had a peephole in his door, and he would wait there for Frances to pass by, and then he would fling his door open, and he would spray Frances with roach killer from a gigantic industrial strength roach spray gun. All of that is in the show. But this part that I'm going to read for you now is about years later, when it was just me and Donald living there in the house. Years after everyone else had gone, and it was just me and Donald there in the house. Sometimes Donald would ask me to go shopping for him, and I would. I would bring him his milk and vodka and cartons of Pall Mall cigarettes, and sometimes he would give me lists, and he would ask me to bring him his groceries, and sometimes he would ask me for chicken chow mein from this little Chinese joint on 2nd Avenue that he loved. And always Donald would give me $5 from his paycheck for going shopping for him, which I thought was incredibly generous of him, and at the time was truly terribly helpful to me. And I would always laugh and say, "Truthfully, Donald, don't you sometimes miss Frances?" And Donald would laugh, and he would admit that truthfully, yes, he did miss Frances. I think Donald just loved teasing Frances. Donald was terrified at the prospect of going to a nursing home. I think he was afraid, and I'm sure rightfully so, that they wouldn't let him drink in a nursing home. But sometimes I would find Donald lying on the front stoop of the house in the throes of some kind of fit, rigid but racked with tremors, with his eyes rolled back in his head and foam welling from his nostrils and his mouth. And if he could speak, he would ask me to bring him his milk and vodka down from his room, and I would. I think Donald was having the DTs. And then one day, Donald called me into his room, and he handed me a slip of paper with a phone number written on it. The phone number of a nursing home in the Bronx he had somehow found out about. And Donald asked me if I would call the number for him. So I did, and an ambulance came, and the ambulance attendants strapped Donald to a folding chair, and they carried him off down the stairs. I stood in the hall and watched as they bore Donald away. He was very thin. He had always kept his boyish figure. He was wearing very little, just a few rags falling from his bony shoulders. As he floated down the stairs, strapped to the folding chair, he looked like a religious icon being carried in a parade. He floated down with this odd, upright sort of bobbing, like a seahorse. He looked up at me over his shoulder as he floated down. I know he would have waved, but his arms were strapped to the chair. But he called to me. He said, "Goodbye. You can have anything from my room you like." And I called out after him, "Goodbye, Donald. Have fun." And he was borne away. When I called the nursing home in the Bronx a week later to inquire after him, they said they knew nothing of him. They said, "Donald Milburn?" They knew of no one by that name. They had already misplaced him. Years after Donald had gone, when it was just me and the cats there in the house, sometimes I would go down into Donald's room and I would sit down on the floor, and a kind of terror would take hold of me. I would imagine going into the closet and huddling there in a corner. I would sit there on the floor and let the emptiness of the room take hold of me, the height of the window, and an old grey futon lying in a heap on the floor. I could stay like that for a long time, feeling the emptiness of the room. So that's from East 10th Street. So I've always been very shy, and it never in a million years would have occurred to me that I would be a performer. But I always knew that I wanted to write poetry, and I knew that if I was going to write poetry, I would have to do readings. And in the early 1980s, I started doing readings in New York, mainly in nightclubs like the Pyramid Club. And I would always wind up reading at like 2 in the morning after people had been dancing to wild disco music for hours. And so I kind of had to make my readings like performances, and then I started staging these dramatic monologues with sets that were painted by Helen, who is also an amazing painter, as Mother was. And so that's kind of how I got into performance. And then other writers who were writing and staging things downtown started asking me to be in their shows, such as Kęstutis Nākas, who's here tonight, the great playwright from Chicago, and that's really, Kasturi's kind of got me into show business. So after a number of years of appearing in plays downtown, I thought, well, maybe I should try and write a play too. So I wrote a play about my childhood. It was a vampire play, a kind of fantastical autobiography, not really a vampire play, but a play about a little boy whose mother tries to convince him that they're both vampires. And then after that, almost every year from 1988 to 2000, I would premiere a new play or show at the La Mama Experimental Theater Club, usually around Halloween, and they were always about my childhood. And I'd like to read and perform some excerpts from those plays for you now, but first I'd like to show you some slides from the original productions so you can see what they look like, and so you can see some of Helen's amazing sets. So here are some slides first. And just so you know, these slides are stills from old videotapes, which is why they're very, very blurry. This is from a show called The Ghost of Brooklyn. That's at La Mama. In the show, I drew a beard and mustache on stage. That's what that is. So that's The Ghost of Brooklyn. It's set, the opening scene is in a train station. The little boy is waiting in the train station with his mother for a train, and the mother goes into the ladies' room and never returns, and the little boy sits there in the waiting room for 7 years waiting for her. So that's me and mother sitting in the waiting room, and those are the statues of the beautiful naked stone warriors. And then there's the ladies' room over on stage left. Those are the stone warriors in the train station, Helen's sets. And these two are scenes from a play called Mosquito Succulents, which is a play about a little boy and his sister and their mother all waiting for the killer to strike. They're locked upstairs in their bedroom at night, waiting for the killer to strike. That's Mosquito Succulents. So I'd actually like to read you the opening scene of Mosquito Succulents now. This is a bit of an experiment, and it might not work. I hope it does. This opening scene is just for two people, the little boy and his sister. So I'll just read both parts and hope that it works. Try and, be a little understanding. The little boy is named Luther. In the first play that I did, the vampire play, my mother was played by Happy Face, the great drag queen Happy Face, and the little boy in my script was called Edgar, but I didn't feel like calling him that. At that time, I felt too exposed, so I told Happy Face, well, I guess since you're the mother, you can name him. And Happy Face named the little boy Luther, and he wound up being called that in every play I wrote ever since then. But in Mosquito's Succulents, the little girl wound up being named Annabelle, but while I was writing it, I just called her Helen, and that's what she's called in the script, so that's what I'll call her. So this is Luther and Helen. And the show opens with Luther on stage alone, digging in the backyard with a spade as it's growing dark. So lights up on Luther. There is a smell here, a strange smell. I don't know where it came from, blown suddenly through some half-forgotten window, but it's sweet to me, so sweet. Oh, don't go, sweet smell, don't go. You'll make me want to cry. I don't know from what the sweetness of this smell is made, something only a moth could thrive on, yet I once thought it might sustain me. An old doom drags me back by the nose through time, and I am as doomed as I ever was. I could crouch here through a whole day, and the lights familiar fanning down from gold into the tall dislocations of the night. But in the dark, I would grow too frightened. This is not a place to come back to except in dreams. And then Helen jump ropes on stage, singing some ghastly jump rope ditty. Helen, what are you doing, digging so close to dark, little Luther? Digging a hole for the night to squat in? What are you exhuming? Luther, shh, old Mrs. Perkins might hear. Helen, she's deaf as a post. Besides, she never comes close to her windows. Luther, and Mother? Helen, Mother's upstairs practicing self-hypnosis. Let me look. What's the big secret? Luther, if you swear on your life you won't tell anyone. Helen, cross my heart and hope to die. Stick a needle in my eye. Luther, all right, but if you tell, I'll kill you and bury you here too. Helen, and dig me up after dark to gloat over? Ha! I'll drag you down with me. The earth is gluttonous, Luther, gluttonous. Beware of bending too low over that grave. There may be a hand waiting to drag you down, a cold, clammy, claw-like hand. And then Luther pulls a human hand up from the hole that he's been digging. Helen shrieks and jumps back. Luther, hush! Do you want to get us arrested? Helen crawls forward, fascinated. Helen, Where'd you get it? Luther, it isn't just a hand, it's a whole body. Helen, let me see, is it a man? Luther, yes. Helen, is he naked? Luther, he was naked when I found him. Helen, why, it's Carl, the bad boy from up the block. Everyone says he ran away. Where'd you get him? Luther, I found him here 2 days ago, lying in the ivy. Helen, he's gone all gray, like driftwood. His throat has been ripped out, Luther, and his sex has been torn off. Helen, he was almost a grown-up. His legs were starting to get hairy. It's strange. I feel like I would have recognized him even without his face. He looks a lot nicer dead, though. He'll never shoot razor blades at us with his slingshot anymore, Luther, or try to make us eat battery acid. Helen, what a bully. Dead, he looks almost handsome. I wonder who did it. Do you think Mother did it? Luther, that hadn't occurred to me. No, I don't think so. Helen, she does something strange while we're at school. You know she leads a double life. Luther, but it wasn't her. I think I know who did it. Helen, who? Luther, never mind, I won't tell you. Helen, did you do it, Luther? I bet you're a killer. Luther, you know it wasn't me. It's someone who visits me sometimes in the rain. He left the body as a present. It was a present for me. Helen, I'll bet you did it. Oh, Luther, what's it like to kill someone? Luther, he only comes in the rain. Who? Luther, I can't tell you. You did it, Luther. Luther, no, I did not. Helen, you're a killer. If you didn't, then who did? Tell me. Luther, you wouldn't be able to see him. He only comes to me when I'm alone. Helen, who is he? Luther, I don't know. He only comes in the rain. There in the back of the yard, behind the shed where nothing grows, that's where he appears. He comes from out of the leaves. He comes from among the weeds, from a great distance, barefoot in a dark coat, all wet and ragged. The rain surrounds him. What beautiful feet he has. His feet are white and live among the roots. He can stand still only in mud puddles. What wild eyes he has, dangerous. He doesn't look at me. A great silence surrounds him. A silence that makes birds fly away, shrieking in fear. He gave me the corpse. He left it for me. It was a present. Helen, can I see him? I want to see him. Luther, maybe someday when it rains, come with me into the back right-hand corner of the yard where nothing grows. Then maybe you'll see him. Maybe. Helen, let's play funeral. Luther, no, he doesn't want to play. Leave us alone. Helen, don't be mean. I could be the priest and you could be the widow. We could play at mourning. Luther, I am the widow. No, leave us alone. He doesn't like you. He's mine. Helen, don't be such a stingy creep. I'm not a stingy creep. You're a nosy perker. Well, you're a deranged killer. Busybody, ghoul. And then Luther making the corpse speak. Get away from here. I don't like you. Helen, You know, I could have you thrown in jail or the loony bin. Luther, I don't ask for much, just a corpse. Helen, oh, all right, I'll leave you your stupid corpse. It's starting to rot anyway. Do I detect a bit of rot already? Luther, no! Helen, oh, Luther, I won't tell Mother, I promise. Luther, you better not. Helen, I'm going upstairs to write my novel. I am a great artist. Luther, so am I. Helen, suit yourself, bye. Luther, good riddance. And then Luther's left alone with the corpse. And then this scene ends with a monologue to the corpse. So I'll read that for you. And then that's the end of the scene. So this is Luther to the corpse. It's growing dark. It's growing dark. A face under the dirt. Whose is it? Is it a lover or a root? Are you cold, beautiful one? Don't shiver. I'll hold you. I'll rock you into the dust settling dark. What do you see down there under the roots when you go sliding with your glass eyes? Are there doors down there? Can you follow your eyeball to the end of its foreboding and come back? Or do you get stuck? Do you cry out, now I'm stuck, stuck? My eyes rolled down a tunnel, and now I'm stuck there at the bottom, stuck with my relentless seeing. Oh, I should never have looked down that tunnel. You were almost a man, but I am a child, a child. I feel my bones tangling. Something is going to be taken away from me. They took away your sex. Do you miss it? You're broken, poor thing, broken. But I won't throw you under the house like the doll that lies there, naked and screaming, too ugly to be played with. The buzzards have all flown away. We are alone now. Everything is secret and horrifying. How I love you. An old doom carries me back to something that awaits me, something only half imagined, half imaginable. I see a man I don't want to become, sitting in a room of pain, with walls as white as teeth. Beside him on a bed, a youth lies sleeping, all hot with sleep, trusting as though he slept in a mouth. How beautiful he is, naked. The man longs to touch him. I see his hand reaching out, so alone, so lonely in its bones. It could only be my hand. Oh, I don't want that hand. I don't want the hands that I am given. Give me only things that can be loved. The hand reaches, knowing that it dares reach only in sleep, knowing its monstrosity, knowing what would happen should it touch and the youth awaken. Oh, but you'll not wake, will you? And if you did, you wouldn't shun me, you wouldn't beat me into the dirt. That's why I sit with the dead. Oh God, that's why I sit with the dead. So that's the opening to Mosquito section. So, do we have more slides? Can we look at more? So, yeah, this is from a play called Motel Blue 19, which is about a little boy. Did I just turn something off? No, okay. It's about a little boy who sets off with his mother by car on a summer vacation, only to discover during the course of their drive up the coast that his mother is a hit-run driver. But I'll just perform a monologue, a short one for you from that play now. We can just leave that slide up. So this is from Motel Blue 19. That night I awoke and the bed came loose from its moorings. I was prey to a dream. I thought of the string of murders that had led us to this place. How and when had Mother become a hit-run driver? It now all seemed so natural, such a simple fact of life. I couldn't remember when it all started. It was sometime after we left Savannah, heading up the coast. There was a little girl sitting by the roadside on her book bag, waiting for a bus. When we struck her, she was reading. She never even looked up from her book, though it seemed such a long time before we struck her, an eternity in which I might have screamed, "Mother, look out! We're going to hit someone." But I didn't. Was I paralyzed by shock? Or was I curious to see what would happen? That's more it, I think. Simple curiosity. When we struck her, her book flew into the car, all blood spattered. I kept it, a secret memento. Do you know what she was reading? The collected works of Edgar Allan Poe. Sure seemed to grip her interest. She never even knew what hit her. After we struck her, I looked back just in time to see her lying by the road in a bloody heap, and then she was gone, swept away by the dwindling of our speed, and it was almost like nothing had happened. Mother never mentioned it. She didn't seem to notice. The bloody book lying in my lap was like a dragonfly that had gotten sucked into the car. By the time we reached North Carolina, I knew what to expect. Amazing how quickly one gets used to things. When I saw the old couple reclining on deck chairs, dangerously close to the edge of their lawn, I knew they were too much for Mother to resist. I could feel the whole car tense, as Mother began deliberately not to notice them, lying there so temptingly close to the road, taking a bit of sun, crocheting. They both wore spectacles, and I remember I cringed at the premonition of cracking glass. And then the inevitable drift as the car veered towards them, gaining speed. That same inevitable slowness of speed, those dreadful seconds, long, full of possibility. They both turned towards us, sunlight flashing from their glasses, and their jaws dropped open. Looking at their gaping mouths, I remember thinking, are we going down a tunnel? I had time to think so much, but not once did the possibility of crying out, "Stop! No! Look out!" cross my mind. I felt as though I were driving, and my foot bore down on an imaginary accelerator pedal. And then they were gone in a spray of snapped wood and dug up shrubbery, almost like they were hollow and had popped. We didn't speak for a long time. Then Mother said, "Let's stop for eats. I see a Dairy Queen." As I watched her eat her banana split, I remember thinking, I hope they're dead, not just mangled. Things that come apart that easily must be hard to kill. The separate pieces might crawl off, each one nursing its own agonizing life. They come back to me in the night, my mother's victims, my victims, groping and in pain, refusing to die, crawling, holding out their bloody limbs, begging me, imploring, "Hold me in your arms, comfort me, take pity, touch me, let me die, caress me, kiss me, kill me. Get away from me, you filthy heap of bloody, tangled bones. You're ugly. I don't like you. I won't hold you. Don't touch me. Don't make me touch you. I can't teach you how to die. Go do it by yourself. Ugliness. Go die. 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 Go die alone. So that's from Motel Blue. Okay, I'll do one more brief excerpt. This is the prologue to a play called The Drowning Pages. I don't know if I can craft a vessel of words that can save me. I'll try to build a little ship of words, a tub with curved flanks shaped something like a nutshell, and in this little ship of words, this spinning wooden tub, I'll try to get back. I'll try to get back to all I have lost, to all I have lost. Over the waters of loss I'll sail in a little wooden boat, and if I drown along the way, and if I drown along the way, I have a sherry bottle to put these pages in, and these will be drowning pages cast on the waters of loss by a lost adventurer. So, I guess now what I'd like to do, I guess I'll just go till 8:30. I'd like to do 2 short excerpts from my latest storytelling show, which premiered this past May in New York, so just 6 months ago. It's a brand new show called In the Park, and it's really about Prospect Park, which is just my favorite place to go, and I love Prospect Park. So it's kind of an ode to Prospect Park, and it's very much about me now. So I'll do 2 short excerpts from it. This first one is the opening to the show, In the Park. I am a hesitant man. It seems to me that I have spent my life half lost in some rapturous dream I dreamt as a child, from which I have never awakened. Perhaps I don't want to wake up. I think if I did, I might find that I have failed to live. I think that I died as a child. Well, some part of me stopped, but some part of me kept going. I keep on wandering. I wander across Brooklyn as much as I can. Any day I have free, if it's not too bitterly cold or wildly windy or torrentially rainy, I head to Brooklyn. I go to Prospect Park. There is a road in Prospect Park that I love. It leads from the Concert Grove to the bridge over the lagoon. It leads uphill from the Concert Grove, curving slightly, and then it reaches a stretch that I consider to be a lost place, a place along a road that leads nowhere. If you go forward, you will reach nowhere. If you turn and go the other way, you will reach nowhere. Either way along this road, you will reach nowhere. This is the lost place. The road crosses it, leading either way towards no place that can be known. There is no turning back. This is the lost place. Here my heart is at ease. Here I am content. Here I wander. This is the road that crosses the lost place. Sometimes in the summer, I sit down in the grass beside the road, stunned by the sun in the grass, stunned into stillness by the sun lying gold in the grass. I lie down in the grass and feel the hot gold beneath me. I cover my face with my straw hat and feel the hot gold lying on top of me. I lift my hat and look up at the branches above me, at the green of the leaves gone gold in the light. I am content to lie there in the green gold grass. It is a summer afternoon along the road to nowhere. And I'll read you one more short passage from In the Park. It's very much about me now, but there are passages in it about my childhood as well. And this is a passage about my childhood. Every summer of my childhood, Mother and Helen and I would travel north, up the coast by train. I always loved it in the night when all the passengers were sleeping and the train rocked through the night like a surging cradle. I would press my face close up against the glass and peer out at the land rushing past in the night. In the dimness of the darkened car, I could still see a little of my reflection in the window, that brow, the great dark gulfs of those eyes, and beyond those eyes, within them, the land rushing past in the night. Once, while we were traveling north by train, I don't know how old I was, I think maybe 14. Suddenly, the door to the darkened car flew open and a young man appeared. I don't know how old he was, probably only a few years older than me, but he seemed such a man to me. How beautiful he was. He moved down the aisle of the darkened car and beyond me, and I never saw him again, but I loved him instantly. I would like to go back to that fatal second before love takes place and suffer the transformation over and over. What a sweet and terrible wounding it was. All throughout my life, when I think of myself and what I have done, what I hope to do, when I look in the mirror, I am measuring myself against that boy, that face reflected in the train window, the great dark gulfs of those eyes, and beyond them, within them, the land rushing past in the night. And I think, have I remained true to you, to that boy I once was, to that journey you set out on? So maybe I'll end with one poem, just to get a poem. I'll read a Brooklyn poem. And well, these are books that my friend Aaron Howard makes. They're handmade, limited edition books of my poems, and they can be ordered from Oil Can Press. And a lot of my poems are about New York and about my wanderings in New York. So I'll read to end with a New York poem. This is called The Donuts Luncheonette. At the Donuts Luncheonette, the sun tried to come in under awning. As I ate a Greek omelette, the buses drove by the door. 39th Street and 5th Avenue, Brooklyn, near the Greenwood Cemetery, and more importantly, the central bus depot. I imagine all the bus drivers get their donuts here. Like the wheels of the buses, the donuts keep Brooklyn going. I love this place. This is the first time I have dared venture in. I arrive, of course, near sunset for my lunch at the Donuts Luncheonette. So thank you all so much.